Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios, broadcasting as ever from the beaches of the last free state in America. Although last election could mean that freedom is spreading. It is the 21st of November. I'm joined in the studios by Karen Hunt, who I have come across her writings and Break Free Media and on Substack and elsewhere. And as with all my guests, I found that she had something bright and interesting to say. And now we're going to lay down that gauntlet and set that bar and see if she meets it. So, Karen, thanks so much for coming on the show. How are you?
Oh, man, I don't know. I'm gonna walk away right now. I have to be that exciting. I don't know if I can do that, but yeah,
Real,
I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
real us.
Um,
So, give me a little background. What are what are you all about? How did you come to be grabbing my attention, writing about kickboxing in Egypt and all that? Just curious.
yeah, I mean, I guess
Tell us about you.
that's enough right there, right? So some people seem to be interested in the fact that I went off to Egypt and had some wild adventures there. Started the first and only boxing club for girls in Luxor, Egypt, and so that kind of, with everything that's going on now in the world, I mean, obviously at that time, and this was, I guess I went there mm, maybe like 5 years ago or so. I spent 3 years there. So
This is really recent. This is
yeah,
last six
I
years.
was really into inflicting pain on myself, I guess. I spent 3 years there. But
Why
so,
Egypt? I mean, I'm that's
yeah,
just
well, that's the story. I just finished for the first time telling this story on Yasmin Mohammed's podcast. I don't know if you know who she is, but she was actually married to a jihadist, and she's a really amazing woman. So that's the first time. So I've had a little bit of practice for you're getting probably a better version because it was like I felt a little overwhelmed the first time I told the story. I've written about it, but I never actually talked about it
sure.
before. So yeah, so I have it has to go back to 1966. We have to go all the way back to 1966, which would I was when I was 10 years old. So that, please don't do the math to tell yourself how old I am. But
I don't
my
trust the young.
yeah, so my father was a successful businessman, but he was also a very devout Christian, and so we lived in Los Angeles, well off, no problems there, and he gathered us into his study one evening and said, "God has spoken to me," which God had a habit of doing, and has told. What's that?
And nice for them both.
Yeah, exactly. They had an amazing relationship. And anyway, and that he was going to stop being a businessman and become a writer. And we were going to start traveling the world so he could gain inspiration for his book. So this was, not a normal thing that a family or that the father would say to his family, but obeying God was his thing.
He
So
knows
we
what's up.
exactly. So we took off and started traveling in a bright red VW van. There were six of us in the family, in my family, and we started traveling wherever God led us, which meant 1966, 67, around that time, smuggling Bibles into communist countries, where my parents, could have gone to prison, things like that. Um, uh, all kinds of adventures like this. But basically, what this is all leading up to is that we found ourselves in Cairo just days before the Six-Day War. Okay. There we were, this American family, and they were really wondering, there's like no other tourists here. Why are we the only people here, basically?
What did
And
we
with
not get?
exactly. We didn't get the memo, and there was obviously no internet back then, no social media. And there we are in our bright red VW van with this great big USA sticker, obligatory, sticker on the back. And it made a huge impression on me. Well, the whole experience made a huge impression on me, traveling around the world. It's an age, the age of 10 is an age that, it's sort of a as I don't know, a big point in a person's life as you're growing
Yeah.
up, I think. And I remember old enough to remember a lot of things. And so there we were, and I'll never forget in the streets of Cairo, the men with the guns and angry angry, crazy men in their jalabias wandering around, and the voice of Nassar on these loudspeakers in the streets screaming death to America and its stooge, Israel. We had this obviously not in English, but translated, like, what is he saying, and so this was
Welcome. Enjoy your time here.
exactly, yes. It just, wow, we really, that was bad luck, right? We just happened to get there right then. But we managed, we got out of Cairo, we drove down to Luxor, or up, down, but up, as they would say in Egypt, and only met one car going the other direction the whole way that we went down there. But the thing about Luxor was it was
Sinai. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
exactly, but the thing about Luxor was it was completely different from Cairo. They hadn't gotten the memo either by that point, I don't think, and everything was pretty fine down there, but there were no other tourists. And so I just had this incredible experience in Luxor, in contrast to Cairo. And one of the things was, my father was always getting very angry and saying, well, it's just like all of the Arabs, all they do is lie. All they do is lie. They just take advantage. Everything you do, they're going to try and take advantage of you at every single turn. And I didn't really get it because I was just a kid and my parents were the ones that were dealing with all of this. But on the other hand, they were when we were in Luxor, we sailed on the Nile with a Nubian sailor, and he told me this wonderful story. And, and he was this devout, follower of Allah. And so I asked my dad, I said, well, it just doesn't seem right. They're all wrong and we're right. And it didn't seem right to me that everybody else is going to hell and we're the only ones going to heaven. And, even at that age, even younger than that, I had these types of questions because I have a very busy mind. Okay. It doesn't stop. So I couldn't quite reconcile everything when we would go to all these different countries and see all these people of different faiths or different cultures. And so I couldn't reconcile that going out into the world with this way that I was supposed to be this very closed, like Christians, this is the only way,
Sure.
basically. So, skipping forward a few years, I wanted to I always wanted to be a Bruce Lee. I don't know why, but I wanted to be a female Bruce Lee, and I wanted to take martial arts and all of this. And when I was a teenager, and my parents said no, because that's of the devil, it's from the East, you can't do that. I was very, very strict fundamentalist Christian upbringing, very, very strict.
So, like, not the fun kind.
No,
The banjo, the guitar,
well,
and the excessive communion wine. Okay.
no, it was no, there was no wine, no drinking,
Ooh.
never even heard, not an exaggeration, never heard a swear word in my family, not an exaggeration. But the thing is
I
that
swear that with the wedding at Cana.
well, actually, eventually, because of the we were part of the Plymouth Brethren Church, which is a very, very, I don't know, most people haven't heard of that, but it's very, very conservative. In fact, my mom, huh? Yeah. In fact, my mom was a Mennonite, and she can trace our family all the way back to like the 1600s, so this is like
Generations of non-fun that she can document.
yeah, but people that were very, devout, they weren't, I could say they weren't hypocrites. My parents really, like, I have a lot of respect for my parents, even though I argued with them a lot the older that I got. But
And I jest, but I've spent a lot of time in fundamentalist societies of a few different religions. And what I found, except for the ones who like are lunatics who think they should control the world with death, they tend to be pretty happy people. They're living their lives. They know what they're doing. Like the Amish in upstate New York, happiest people in the world. The Hasidim I deal with all the time around the world, not a doubt in their minds. The world is 5,578 years old, and all is good with the world. And if I do these things, everything will be great. I don't see any stress and worry in their lives. So I mock, but it's a
yeah,
con.
no, I get it. And they're very, they're very, as you say, they don't worry about all these things because they've got everything lined up. They know exactly what it is. And I mean, my thing too, though, is that my father, he ended up being like a very highly regarded author in the 1980s. So he became very, very well known for, but when he started out, he wasn't. We basically lost everything before he, but I always had a lot of respect for him because he believed, he had a strong faith, and he never gave up, and he followed through. And those are the types of things that I learned from my
Sure.
parents, to have integrity, to be honest, to, keep your word, all these kind of things that people don't really value anymore, basically, these days, it seems like, with,
They find
this whole woke.
inconvenient, right?
Right, because we should be embarrassed by our Christian heritage and all that kind of stuff, and all those values, and all
Yeah.
of that. So anyway, but that was basically, so I had these two things going on: this fascination with Egypt and wanting to be a, martial artist and not being able to be. I ended up getting married. Long story. Moving crazily, like falling in love with this Yugoslavian singer that came to visit my parents' family with these missionary friends of my parents, and I was 14 and he was like 22, and I was like, oh, he's the most, I'm in love with this
Stop
guy. Yes.
and say after episode. This is episode of like 180.
Yeah.
You just delivered the best sentence ever uttered on Messy Time. So I'd like to mark
Okay.
that
Wait,
as a
wait.
good
What was
opinion
that?
this
I
event
don't
for
know
everybody.
what was that.
That whole string, Yugoslavian singer visiting my parents' house. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it gets better.
That goes
So
on the dust jacket of the memoir. Go ahead.
yeah, and I know I have to write all this as a memoir. I really do.
Sorry,
But
go on.
yeah. So anyway, so I thought, it's God's will that I marry this person, and so ended up basically moving to England for my last year of university. Went to York University, found him. He was living in London at that time. He was like, I don't know if you know who Cliff Richard is. Best friends with Cliff Richard. He was like the biggest singer in Europe and England in the 80s. And like he was like Elvis, the Elvis Presley of Europe, and he was very famous. So anyway, he was trying to make it as a singer in England, and he was a big singer in Yugoslavia. So we got married, and I found myself living between London and this village in what was then communist Yugoslavia.
Tito's
And
Yugoslavia.
yeah, yeah, by Lake Bled, which is now
Fabulous.
Slovenia. Yeah, so I've had all these experiences of living, but really great experiences. I actually loved living there. It's like my second home now. I love it. My daughter's half Slovene, and but it ended up being a very abusive marriage, physically abusive, horribly abusive marriage, and I didn't know how to talk about it or tell my parents or anything like that because I was so embarrassed. And I'd made this into this big thing. And he was a Christian, and I'm marrying this guy, and nobody, he had this beautiful exterior and all this kind of stuff. But basically, right after we got married, I learned I was walking kind of too fast on the road, and he said, either you walk beside me or you walk behind me. You never disrespect me like that. That was my first introduction, like shortly. And he never said that to me like before we were married, but it was like the minute we got married, it was like I entered this whole other world. And so it took me quite a while to get out of that. But one of the things, like another major moment that relates to all of this is he wanted me to illustrate one of Cliff Richard's album covers. You can find the album cover. It's called "I'm No Hero." Look it up if you want. And the album cover, the irony of it is that the album cover has Cliff Richard, like he's a little guy, and we took all these photographs to get it right before I did the illustration, because I'm an artist. That's what I am first and foremost. I forgot that part. I'm an artist ever since I was a little kid. I have actually 19 children's books published, which I've either written and or illustrated.
That's
You know,
awesome.
from yeah. So which I started doing when I was in England. But I didn't have a lot of confidence because I was just starting out, just graduated. I did not want to illustrate that album cover. I was terrified. This was a big, a lot of money involved in this album. It was a big deal. My husband had some songs on the album that he'd written. And um, and so I was illustrating this cover of Cliff Richard, this little guy, and he was fighting this huge big boxer. It's called I'm No Hero, and there's this huge big boxer that I'm illustrating, and there's little Cliff Richard, and then the back of the cover is him like in the victory pose, with this cool jacket on, and like he's just won the fight.
Yeah.
And so my husband comes home one day, and he just gets angry because he thinks I'm doing a bad job on the album cover, and it's going to totally embarrass him, and it's going to be a disaster, and he punches me in the nose and breaks my nose. Okay.
Jesus.
Yeah, that was kind of my life, cleaning up my blood and things like that. So that was the only time he took me to the doctor, a very nice East Indian man. And we had this story that had fallen off a chair, and the doctor didn't believe it, and so he just took me out of the doctor's office and took me back home. And it's hard for people to understand. It's like, well, why don't you leave, and why don't understand when you're in that type of a relationship. But you get to the point where you really believe the things that the person is telling you about yourself. And I won't go into all of that, but it's basically the psychological torture that you go through more than anything else. But I went back, and I had no choice but to finish that album cover. So there I was, getting like my face a mess, and I finished the cover, and I did a great job. But nobody ever knew, because from then on, I never went to another meeting. Obviously, I couldn't go out of the house then from that point on. But then I got pregnant, my daughter was born, and that was when I first started waking up that, like, I can't continue on like this, living like this. And my daughter, my sister, at that point, it's like, and it's a miracle that I can speak now, because I lost my voice at that point. I was literally to the point where I could not speak anymore, because we would go somewhere and he would say, "Oh, you said such stupid things. It's better that you just don't talk," things like that. You stupid American too. Um, and and this part I didn't tell before, but I guess I'll tell it this
I've
time.
got a side business in contract justice if you need it, if I'm sure people already offered.
No, I've taken care of it all. Don't worry, because there's a victory side to this story. Don't worry. So, because look, I'm wearing my
I
boxing
know.
t-shirt.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Fantastic.
so, and so, at one point, my sister, who I was very close with, called me, and she just knew. And she goes, "Karen, is he abusing you?" And that's all it took. All I had to do then was say yes. It wasn't like I had to initiate a conversation, and that sort of helped me. So there were things that started helping me. Then my parents found out, and they got very angry. Of course, we were visiting them, and we all sat down at the kitchen table. And my dad found out. He was very, very angry, and then we all talked at the kitchen table. My husband, he confessed his sin. He prayed. Everybody prayed together. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get to stay here. And my parents sent me back because, well, he's asked God's forgiveness. You need to forgive him. And so I went back. And at that point, and that, it's like things got better for a while. But then, I didn't come down the stairs fast enough one time for a party that he wanted to go to, and he started strangling me, and I found myself on the ground. He'd almost killed me, basically. And so at that point, something clicked in my head, and I all my fear, all the power that he had over me went away. And from that day onwards, I didn't care anymore what happened. Like, it was just like his power went away.
Yep.
And I told him that, and it was the weird kind of thing. The weird thing was that he never hit me again after that. And I started running in the park. And I thought, you know what? I don't have any money or anything like that, but I have a pair of shoes, and I'm going to do something to get stronger. I was like really 6 feet. I'm 6 feet tall, but I was skinny. And I started running, and every day I was going to run further and further, and I wasn't going to rely on my emotions. however I felt or all the reasons that I could have to stop or anything like that. I was just going to keep going every day that I could. And I started running and I started like waking up that there's like a world out there beyond what I'm living, you know?
Sure.
And eventually through all of that, I was able to leave. I went back to, I told my parents, I was like, they accepted me back. They were very sorry. And I, you know, and looking back, it's like, I was never in a, my parents were not abusive to me. So I think it's hard for people even to understand the extent to what that abuse could be. And they really did feel horrible when I, you know, when I told them, you know, what had happened. I felt so betrayed by them, you know, that they had sent me back. Um, so, so that was all of that. I got married again and had two, I had my daughter with me and I got married again. I won't go into all of that, but that was, I didn't do the best choices with who I got married to. Let's just put it that way. But that once my boys, my kids were all grown up and I'd gone through all of that. I also like at that point, like in the 1990s, I started a creative writing program for incarcerated youth in Los Angeles, which is called Inside Out Writers. And I started working with girls that were facing life sentences for serious crimes. I started this writing program and started giving them a voice, you know, giving these young people a voice that had been so marginalized or just, you know, they were, that was a time when Biden made the law, those laws about, you know, when Hillary Clinton was saying they're all monsters, you know,
Yep.
that time. And so there was these very severe laws. They were being tried as adults and all of the girls that I worked with had been in abusive, you know, relationships with and things like that. And so I got to know their stories. And it was a kind of a healing process for me as well to be there with them. Um, so then I started traveling after my boys uh, grew up and my daughter was, you know, they were all fine. I was a single mom. I raised them. They were all good. And all those years I was training. Like the minute that I got back from England, I started training in martial arts. So I started training in Tang Soo Do, and I got, you know, I went up to second degree black belt in Tang Soo Do. But then it started getting like too political, and I'm not into all that kind of stuff. So, and I realized when you get a black belt, what you should realize is how little you know at that point, you know. And it was not practical knowledge. It was more, I mean, you learn a lot of, you know, focus and, you know, all the katas that you learn and it's a very, very good foundation also for self-discipline and all of that. And I trained like crazy. I mean, that became just my thing to do. Like, I'm going to train. Nobody's ever going to do this to me again. I'm going to, and I mean, okay, right. 10 of you come at me, I'll die, but I'll die fighting, you know, that was basically my attitude. Um, and then I started training in eskrima, which is Filipino stick and knife fighting. So not many women do that. So I did that, which is like you put on the full like samurai gear and you're hitting full contact with sticks, you know, and you're learning not with real knives, but you're learning to fight with knives on the ground. A lot of like the most practical training that I ever had.
Yep.
And I trained in Okinawan weapons with this amazing guy. I trained with like some really legends, but from the past, not legends now, but like legends like a legend in like Peter Sugarfoot Cunningham. He's a kickboxer. He's as much of a legend in kickboxing as Mike Tyson would be in, you know, boxing.
Sugarfoot. Fantastic.
Yeah, Sugarfoot. And I was offered to fight professionally as a boxer, which I turned down because I value my brain. But I did fight full contact. I fought full contact and I fought, you know, boxing, kickboxing. And then I trained others. I would train fighters. I taught classes. And so this became like just a way of life for me, you know, this fighting, being a fighter. And to the point where, you know, I was not fearful. I look back at myself, at who I was when I was in that marriage, cowering, and that was just definitely not the person that I was
No,
anymore.
certainly.
So, and inside my spirit, that's not who I am. So I was always a fight. I realized I was always a fighter. I was always a fighter. But when you grow up in that type of very like really, really conservative fundamentalist Christian or Islamic, and which is, and I say all of that so to understand why I can understand Islam as well, because it's a very, very similar type of a thing where you want, and I was talking to Yasmin Mohammed about this, where as a girl, you want to be the good girl, you're being taught to submit, and so and if you have that, now I have naturally fighting spirit, you're always, those two things are warring inside of you. Like you want to be good, but you want to be bad.
You want to break his
you want to
nose.
somehow, yeah, you somehow want to get out of this because
Yeah.
you know that there's like a better, like you're worth more than that. You have more.
Yeah.
I have more to offer to the world than that. So so when my kids grew up, I started traveling. That's what I always wanted to do. I just got a backpack. I started traveling around. I go, and spending time in places like I spent, a couple months in Bolivia, in Sucre, Bolivia. I would find people to train with, so I would do my training. And I went to Costa Rica a couple times. I spent like 6 months there, and I and I taught women. I started teaching kickboxing to women there, and I was doing a program for kids called My World Project. I created this program for kids, connecting kids around the world through art and writing. So wherever I went, I would just do this, and other people would say, "Hey, I want to do that. I'm going to Colombia. I want to do that program with kids." So I was doing that. I went to the Sahara Desert for a month in Morocco and did the program with kids there. It was just wonderful. It was, this was really wonderful things I was doing. So when I was in Costa Rica, I met a woman who is sort of like older hippie woman, and she went off to Egypt, Luxor, for a vacation. And within 2 weeks, she was married to a guy there and living there in this villa that she was fixing up as an Airbnb. And she said, "Hey, come and stay in this Airbnb. We've got the bottom floor done."
Mm.
So that was basically all I needed. It wasn't like I had this like thing that I'm going to go to Egypt, but when that opportunity arose, I decided, oh, I'm going to go. That sounds cool. I know somebody there now. I have this thing from my past. I want to see if it's really true what my dad said about Islam. And I think that like enough time has gone by, and I don't really think people are like that. And it must be the religion of peace. And I went there really wanting to open my whole heart to, not to become a Muslim, but to accept it. And so I went, and that was my sort of how the whole thing happened. Now I think that was in 2017 that I went there, or something like that. So within about 2 weeks of being there, a young man had attached himself to me, and I entered into this whole world of the intrigue of Luxor, of this whole industry there, of where the men marry foreign women and then just completely destroy their lives, take everything from them. And the whole western bank of Luxor is built on the money of foreign women. I mean, all of it. That is the business. And they call it business, Bezness, yeah. So, I mean, this happens around the world, but in Luxor, it's a really special place like that, because it's this little microcosm and every family is involved in this. So it's really a fascinating place, but you have to it's not for the faint-hearted, let me tell you. the other thing, it's a very, very magical place. I mean, women will go there, uh, with visions of the Arabian Nights and, all this kind of stuff. And then these nice looking young men in their jalabiyas, flowing robes, start love bombing them. And a lot of times these very elderly women, I mean, you see them walking or on the corniche there holding hands with their young man, and I'm thinking, aren't they embarrassed? Don't they know what's going on? But they really don't. And it's really,
I'd interject to say
yeah.
one of the funniest ads I've ever seen, which would never have survived Me Too. It was in the '90s in New York. It was a great ad. It was actually for whatever it was for. Such a good ad. Don't even know what the product was. Full page ad on bus stops, and it showed this beautiful young woman, huge cleavage in a wedding dress, like 20 tops. And her husband, the groom, is like jokingly old, like
Yeah.
99, wizened, his tuxedo's falling off. And the tagline is from his point of view, he's got a grin that's meeting at the back. It says, "My friends tell me she's after my money. So?"
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's really true. I mean, and because the man, like he's well, I'm sure the rest of his family had a different opinion of that, right?
Yep.
Watching that's
People make
like such
arrangements.
a
The
nightmare.
warp and weft of the human condition is a
Exactly.
magical thing to observe.
Yeah, so that yeah, and I think and when when both parties understand that, I mean, like I know a French woman, she's French, so obviously she goes there, she has her boy, that she's married to because well, when you do this, you have to get married. You cannot. It's called an Orphy marriage because a man cannot even go into a woman's apartment alone there. So it's kind of a thing where they do this sort of contract, and they're really obsessed with their contracts in Luxor. I mean, they've got contracts for everything, and everybody's involved in the scams. So you've got the real estate agent, the I don't know, the car dealer, the police, the lawyers, the family, everybody. There's five families there that rule, and they're like five mafia families, and they rule everything, going back to the time of the pharaohs. Tomb raiders. They know what they're doing.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So this French woman that she has her guy and she goes there. She supports him the entire year and she'll go there for a couple months and go home. And she knows what she has and but a lot of these women, that's not how it is. Huh?
It's like a timeshare.
Yeah, it is exactly. And but the thing is they really think that they're the only one, but they never are. Like these guys have, obviously he's not going to sit there and wait for her to come back, 10 months from now. He's going to have like three other ones that are going to be coming along,
He's maximizing his opportunities.
Yeah.
And this
So
sounds like a perfect little ecosystem.
yeah, it works very well for them. But anyway, so yes, I got involved with someone there, but I looked at it from a little bit different perspective, where I started being so intrigued with the life there, and yeah, he was a nice looking guy. We were having a nice time together. If it was here, I'd just have an affair with the guy, right? But there, you have to do this sort of contract thing. And so I decided, how if I really want to accept Islam and find out all about Islam, there is no better way for me to do it than to just go with this thing and get totally immersed in this culture and everything about it. I mean, it's in Islam they can marry up to four women. It's there's nothing
Yeah.
like wrong about that. There's nothing illegal about it.
No.
So he
When we
actually,
lived in Morocco, I should when we lived in
yeah.
Morocco, I was not married yet. And Moroccan society is very much North African, right? So there's thing that the Westerners don't usually get is there's no such thing as public space. It's private and stranger, right? So the West has this weird public space, and a lot of um, the boulevards and such in Moroccan cities are a legacy of French influence. Like that's not
Hmm.
how Arabs build, like or North Africans. And so we went to a wedding once because there isn't this idea of like casual acquaintance, either your family or not, right? In a sense, like if you're here, you must be inside. And
Right.
so we were dancing, great music, right? A lot of fun goes on all night. And of course, it's at weddings where young girls, unmarried girls, can meet potential husbands because the only place you're not allowed to meet them anywhere else. And so, but I'm young and stupid in my 20s, and I'm dancing with this young lady who, if she were in America, would have supplanted Giselle Bundchen as the Supermodel of the Year award. She's happy and dancing over me, and I'm great. And her cousin comes over, so 16 and 17. I'm 22, and they're dancing. And my friend, who's still a good friend of mine to this day, another American, we'd studied Arabic together in Chicago, and he came over to me. He's like, "We got to go." I said, "Whoa, we're having a great time." He's like, "No, we got to go. Her mother and her aunt are over here negotiating with me about the wedding. Like, we got to get out of here." I said, "But hold on now." He's like, "No, no, no. There's no hold on. We're going."
That's
And
crazy.
it was crazy. And so he tries to explain to Khadija, the one girl's mother, the other's aunt, that in fact I'm already engaged. And she says, "One, two, three." Man, it was now all she wanted was a rich American who
Yeah.
would buy them a house. They're cousins, so this is perfect. They'd be happy together. I might appear once a year to make babies and pay the bills. Right. So this dude like, "This is a great idea. Let's do this." And he grabbed me and took me out of there. And we took off. Khadija was so persistent. This is before cell phones, no internet. About a week later, I'm sitting in our villa, and the door knocks. She's found me. Now she's gone around in Saadna, which is the old city of Fes, and asked about the Americans. Like that's not the weirdest thing. Wasn't that hard to
Right.
find us.
Right.
And she came in and was busy cleaning and extolling the virtue of her daughter and her niece to me. I left the next day, got on the next plane out.
You got out of there. Good for you. Well, actually, I'm surprised because, I mean, in Luxor, they would never do that with their women. I mean, it's only the men who are allowed to do that.
Yeah.
The women. I mean,
Well, this is really she's like one of the married. I was only 22, 23. It
yeah,
wasn't that weird. Like she was looking for husband material and thought, well, he's an American. They got money.
it's gonna
Yeah,
have
two or
money of
time, sure.
yeah, yeah, I can see
Cousins, right?
that.
They're not sisters. That's weird. Cousins. So if you have a second wife, it's better. At least they're related, right? All that logic came in, and it was hilarious. And but I never forget because I was young and it was funny. And Jess is like, "We really got to go." I was like, "Hold on here, no." There must be some merit in this plan.
Yeah, just come and visit. Yeah, but I mean, they all obviously it was they want your money. They want, that's the thing. But in Luxor, if any, they would know. I mean, they're very, very Muslim. So I don't know for like they would never do that with their daughters because you can only men can marry outside of Islam. They can marry a woman because then that woman has to convert to Islam. But for one of their own women to marry
Yeah,
outside of Islam, that would mean that women aren't as strong as men, so she wouldn't be able to convert her husband. So the whole thing is about growing Islam, and I found out all these things about, it was great because I could then speak with a lot of authority about this culture or this religion, and not knowing that one day I'd be sitting here like this and people would be, with everything that's happening, the whole world changed after October 7th, I mean, the whole world changed. So suddenly this topic is a very, very, you know, present
trenchant
topic.
one.
Yes,
Apropos.
exactly. Yeah, so I did get married. He had, and he told me, and a lot of times they're not this honest, but he did tell me that he had already an Egyptian wife, and he had to tell me that by law or whatever, and she had to agree, and she had agreed, and a lot of times the wives will agree because
For
they,
life.
the whole plan is that they're going to get something out, it's going to benefit their family. They're
Sure.
going to get a lot of money. They're going to get more prestige because all they care about is just, looking like how much how many more villas basically they can build off of, whoever that person is, or another car or whatever. So she agreed, and I was like, okay, well, that's okay. I'll, and she was young, and oh, we don't, it was an arranged marriage. We don't love each other. It's just, in fact, we can't stand each other. And,
Thank God you're here. Alhamdulillah.
exactly. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
So they got this whole scam down
Exactly.
perfectly. That's
Yeah,
great.
and exactly. And he had four children already. He must have been like 31. She was probably like 21 or something, and 22. And she had one son, and then she had triplets. And he was like, that should never have happened to me. It's like,
That's your fault.
that was exactly, that was too many. And, and so they were just old enough, I think, where he could start, you know, he'd been very busy basically up until, because they were small. So he was finally able to get out of the house and start doing some business, And so,
That's
and so,
fantastic. So
yeah,
a flood of foreign women is the cash cow that keeps Luxor afloat. That's the
exactly.
best thing ever.
Yeah. It is.
That's
And
fantastic.
but the thing of it is that so we had, it was fine, we had this great like wedding with his friends, his gang of friends, and and I met his wife. I met his mother, would hug me, she loved me, they made me food. I would dance with her at weddings, it was like part of the family. I had my own villa, so he would bring his sons there, we would go to dinner, all this kind of stuff. It was like we were gonna be, this family. And it was like he and he was very intelligent. We had a lot of really long conversations sitting by the Nile, drinking beer, He told me fascinating stories about the underground rings of, like the treasure, what's it called? The treasure, it's not black, it's the underground market. What is the underground market for treasure? A lot of interesting things like that. Really, really, even some stories that I probably like might be dangerous for him if I were to repeat them. And I'm not like that into destroying his life. Although I'm sure he knows. I mean, he already knows that I'm doing all of this. So because I've had threats from my writing, definitely, and I can never go back there. I would be
Yeah.
probably killed. I would be
Yeah.
killed at this point. But so I asked, things started really going bad because when I went to Egypt, and I think a lot of people are under the impression that it's the most progressive, Middle Eastern country. Well, I discovered that, like still 90% of the girls suffer from female genital mutilation, and when I asked my husband, his name is Mohammed, not Mohammed, Mohammedine. When I asked him
Tell Muhammad.
if you, yes, exactly. But when I asked him, well, he had sons. I said, if you had a daughter, would you do that? He goes, of course I would. Of course, So when people object and they say, oh, that's not really true. No, I know it's true because I had these conversations, and this is what is done. And there's no question about it, and you don't question it. And and they really believe that, like we talked about the 6 Day War, I really believe that they won the 6 Day War. I mean, it's like they have this idea.
See, they invented alternative facts long before
exactly.
Kelly Conway got to it.
I mean, the misplaced arrogance and pride is really quite astounding.
Sure.
And the whole idea that I did find out that, eventually, it's like all Western women are prostitutes because they haven't had female genital mutilation. So they're all must be prostitutes and just sex crazy. And they're not, they can't be controlled. But of course that makes it also very
Hearing
exciting.
about this rumor for a while, I've been looking into it.
Yeah, exactly.
I find a lot of evidence.
You might question that, exactly. But and all they do is watch porn. That's their idea of how life is outside of Luxor. So
That's
it's a
the
very
greatest.
it's a very twisted society, and very, but at the same time, weirdly, and like a lot of very hypocritical, whatever religion it is, when you get so, when you have to live up to the standard that nobody can possibly live up to anyway, because you're ordinary human beings, and you end up having to, it becomes, things become very like perverse and twisted and in the
Constantly
shadows.
atoning for these horrible sins,
Yeah,
which are imaginary to begin with, and it's this
exactly.
horrible, twisted system of control. That's nuts.
Yeah, and so this is sort of it just became this thing that I was not like feeling it much anymore. Like this is really not very cool what's
Take
going on
take the
here. And I
road.
was realizing that, and everything is based, like when you live under Sharia law, like when I was there, not a woman in Cairo, she had invited a colleague of hers into her apartment to have coffee. And the other men in the building threw her off the balcony and killed her for doing that. I mean, like, it's like, and it's hard, like, how do you explain this to these Western woke women or whatever? It's been so frustrating for
I
me
just want to gift them a
to,
one-way ticket to Gaza City.
yes,
I
exactly.
suggest you get
And
off the
they,
plane with a rainbow
abs
flag and décolletage and see what happens to you.
Right, and well, you're trying to impose your Western imperialist colonialism upon them, even by saying, I have a problem with FGM. Well, that's their culture. I don't like, no, it's not a culture. This is abuse, and it's disgusting, and it's horrific, and it needs to stop. And, talk to any activist from any of these countries. Listen, can you listen to them and hear what they have to say about their own country and how they're
My
being
special
tortured?
love for the Western left is there would be nowhere without hypocrisy and a complete lack of understanding of the term irony. Speaking to
Exactly.
someone the
And
other day,
absolutely, yeah,
the only phrase I ever use for them is always wrong, never in doubt.
exactly. And absolutely also no sense of humor. If you,
No, nothing
yeah,
can
you
ever be
can't have it.
funny.
You can't have a sense of humor. So yeah, so at a certain, so we were married for I guess like a year and a half, and then finally, because this was the long game, they finally came around to the point where they were going to scam me, and and so they had, and this is so great. I just love telling this story. They had this property. It was a great property. I mean, it looked like everything I would dream, to live. It had potential. It needed some fixing up. It had like these two domed houses, this big area, grassy area, this garden. It was beautiful by the Nile. Well, they had $50,000. All they needed from me was $16,000. Not a lot of money, $16,000. And I said, well, okay, can I be a third owner? That's the only way I'll do it, because I have to, I'll be the one on social media. I'll be the one bringing people there, as like, I thought maybe we could do a writer's retreat. I did all this. I had all these speculative things. I said, however, I have to find out if I should do this or not. I have to think about this. I'm going to do some research and blah, 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 all of this. So, of course, every single person that I asked their advice that I respected back in the United States, you can guess what they said. Don't do it, right? Don't do this. And I'm thinking, well, but you're just prejudiced against whatever. I'm trying to think,
I'm very curious because I'm not trying to do timelines in my head. What did your children think of you marrying this guy in Luxor? Were they at the wedding?
right? Oh no, they were not at the wedding. They were no.
I'm
But my
fascinated.
daughter, my daughter was really unhappy with me. My daughter's an attorney. My sons were kind of like, okay, mom, we know that, we know you're crazy. So, okay. But, my younger son, I'm very close with all my kids. And I mean, we've been through so much together. Like I fought for my kids for, there's a lot more to all the story of our past and everything. But, my one son is 6'8", and my other son is 6'5". And I had, introduced, because I learned a lot about, like, one of the things that I learned when I was there was you have to be 10 times stronger. And this is what I say too, like what people don't realize also about the war in Gaza, like you don't negotiate. You have to be that what they understand is strength. And I
Yeah,
learned that
period.
even as a woman. you have to be, you have to come back at them. You
Yeah.
have to be a Madeira, okay? Which means a boss lady, right? You have to come. And I didn't want to be that in the beginning because I'm thinking, well, I'm Western, that is like being a colonial imperialist, obnoxious Western woman. But no, no, no. That's what you have to be. That's what they understand. You have to be so tough, so mean. If somebody, and I'm not a yeller, I don't yell at people. So but if somebody yells at me, I have to come right back at them, look them straight in the eye, and come back harder than they did. So that is one thing that I learned over time there. So my kids, uh, my sons were just like, well, the second you need us, just let us know, and we'll be on a plane there. Basically, that was them. But they knew that this is their mother. I'm an adventurer. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. They didn't like condemn me or anything like that, but they were right there, always like, okay, what's happening, mom? That kind of thing. And my daughter was just like, I can't believe you did that, mom. I can't believe you did that. So when they did this, I mean, I realized, okay, they came to this is so funny. It should be a movie. They came to my villa with bags of money to prove to me that they were buying bags of 50,000, apparently, dollars. Okay. And they started very seriously counting it out with these two other guys, mafia guys that were watching. I'm like, yeah, so okay, so they were. I noticed that you're like looked frozen. Your expression wasn't changing as I was
Huh?
talking.
Like, huh?
Exactly. Anyway, so they were like, it's just so bizarre. You're sitting there and they're like counting these bags of money with these two big guys, and then they went off on their motorcycle. My husband and his best friend, who's like a big tough guy, um, they went off. He's nicknamed Banjo. So Mohammedan and Banjo go off on their motorcycle with clutching these bags of money apparently to pay the guy, and then they turn around and say to me, well, we've done our part. Now you need to come up with your money. If you don't come up with the money, we're going to lose everything. We're going to lose the property and blah, 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 this stuff. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. I didn't agree to
I haven't
anything.
said
And
yes to anything. Thank you very
exactly, I
much.
haven't said yes. And by the way, I've never seen a contract. I don't know who this person is that you're paid this money to. I haven't seen a contract that you would like me to. You think I'm just going to send you $16,000, and they're going, but of course you trust us. You don't, and then you don't trust us. How could you? Oh, you're going to ruin our lives and all this kind of stuff. It just started getting worse. And so the more that happens, the more I'm thinking, I don't want to do this.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, do women literally just do that? And yes, they do.
Oh, yeah.
They give
Oh, yeah.
they give everything,
Yes.
everything to these men. And I'm like,
That's crazy.
so there's my daughter and I came up with a plan. Okay. So my daughter says, hey, okay, this is how we're going to do this. How about you give them a contract?
Right. Exactly. That's
And
a
I
good
think
idea.
that was probably the first and only time that had ever happened. Okay. So my daughter comes up with a very simple 2-page contract in English that now they're going to have to translate, right? Because it's always the woman that has to translate, and the translators that they have, so you'll know anything, right? Yeah, exactly. I'll never forget the day I present them, and I'm living in this property now. I'm living in the property. I present them with a contract. And that was the moment when everything, the facade went away.
Well,
And it was like the hatred. It was like night and day. It was like, what are you doing? You evil woman.
yeah.
You giving us a contract. Like you're trying, and then it was, you're trying to cheat us, you're trying to ruin our life. And they got very, well, my husband wasn't so aggressive of a person as Banjo, but Banjo got very aggressive. It was very, very, I was like, okay, well, now I know the truth,
No, I
right? Now I
know.
know. I said, this is a simple contract. All it says is where, that we agree where this money is going, what it is for, and that I am my ownership, in this property. And that
Yeah.
was absolutely like, there's no way they were ever in a million years going to sign that piece of paper, you know. And so I said, well, the deal is off then. Well, that was then, you know, and now what I've done is I've made it an international affair. You know, it's not just a local thing, you see.
Yeah.
I mean, I did, and my it's so sad. I even felt a little sorry for Mohammadine because at that moment, you know, and it was sad. His mother was dying at that moment, so he was love. You know how they really love their mothers, and he was really wrapped up in that. And not only that, but as he'd been leaving the hospital, a tuk-tuk hit him and his arm was broken. So he's standing there, you know, saying, I should never ever have met you. You ruined my life. You know, look, everything was going wrong since I met you, you know, and it's like all your fault. And you have the evil eye and all this kind of stuff. He was saying, he just got so, and he started muttering in Arabic and he was so angry. And so I just said, you know, I said, I locked myself in. I said, you guys have to, you have to get out of here. And then I just bought a plane ticket and I was out within 5 days, and they were still expecting that they could convince me. Like they were shocked that I bought a plane ticket. And then they thought, you know, they still tried everything, like threatening me, you know, being nice to me. You know, his friends would come and try to convince me otherwise. It was actually even scary because Bonjo was very threatening towards me. And I locked the gate one night in the middle of the night. I heard, you know, somebody's rattling the gate and I know that it's him, you know. And so the night that I got out of there, Mohammadine came to say, he said how he was sorry and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, you know, I told you, and I told him when I first married you, I said, if you ever even yell at me, I'm gone, you know? So I left. I was gone. I had basically, and it was humiliating for him because a year and a half of plan, the right moment came, and not only he would never hear the end of basically that I had presented him with a contract, you know, when they have their contracts. So so I'm thinking I'm never going to go back. And but then and this part, so I go back, I'm in Phoenix, and the next thing I know, I see on Facebook that didn't take long, they have another woman in there ready to buy the property, getting married to another friend of theirs. His name's Ali. I contacted her. And
Now, do you get divorced on the way out?
there's no divorce. It's like, and it's not a real marriage. It's like, it means nothing outside of there. They have a piece of paper. He probably registered it also with the government. Mine, they don't always do that, but I think he had made mine a little more official, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. It means nothing to me.
I'm curious about the mechanics because the city of contracts who are there to, you know, milk dollars and euros and pounds from foreign women. I assume there'd be some
Piles of contracts. No, there's piles of these. Then they keep them. Like they keep
Right.
their contracts. They're very obsessed with with their contracts. But that one, it's like it was just, it's like a convenience thing. So it doesn't mean anything beyond that. But I mean, for a lot of these women, it does mean something. I would see them, you know, these women, they get abused. They become like, they cut off their whole life. You know, their families get angry with them. Obviously, they cut off their families, or maybe they are women who really didn't have friends or family. You know, they've spent their whole life working hard. They've got a bit of savings, and then they just
sniff out the vulnerable.
give it all.
That's what they do.
Yeah, they're vulnerable. They pick, and that's why I think it's like he realized he'd picked the wrong person when he picked me. But in a way, it's like I went with it. You know, I went with the whole thing, and I'm glad I did because I wouldn't have wanted to. I don't regret that adventure at all, basically. So I told this woman what had happened to me, and she's like, oh, she couldn't believe it. She's from Germany, and she said, and she was going to go back to Germany because she'd already given all her money away to her husband. She was going to go back to Germany and try to come up with, I think it was like 60,000 euros So it went from 16,000 from me to 60,000. She was going to buy like half of the property. Can you imagine? She was going to somehow try and like get a loan or something. Can you imagine if she had done that? And well, I mean, and how would she even think like she was going to start a massage business? I mean, how would she even think that she could like make that money back? You know? And I was thinking, wow, 16,000, that was a pretty good deal, you know? So I broke their business. I started breaking their business. And then I found out somebody else who was married to this guy, Bonjo, and was sending him money, and I broke that business. So they were really angry because not only did they, you know, I hadn't followed through, but I was now like destroying all their business.
Not
And what
only
I
did you not coughed up with cash you were supposed to, but now you're ruining their other mining prospects. Yeah, I imagine they'd be
exactly,
pretty angry.
and and they were excuse me. The where they really went wrong was Bonjo started sending threatening messages stupidly.
Yeah.
My Mohammadine, he was actually not that stupid. He was a pretty smart person actually, but Bonjo was like the muscle guy.
Yeah.
And what I realized also along the way, what I realized is that because like they will sell and resell the same properties more than once,
Of
even, you know.
course.
So
Probably don't even own it. The owner's
they
probably out of
don't own
town.
it. Exact.
No.
No, no, exactly. They don't because it's the mafia lords that own. There's like a couple of them, and they're serious. Like those guys are the guys you don't want to mess with. Okay, so they're probably they're in the employ of these guys, and they make it seem like they're well-to-do and they own these properties and all of that, but it's really they're just there to scam these women and get the money, and then they get a
I'm really
percentage of it.
rich. I'm really, really rich, and but I desperately need your $16,000.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Yeah,
There was
exactly
a
like that.
fantastic, if you haven't seen it, it was on, I think it was on Netflix. It was like 4 or 5 shows in a series about this guy who scammed these women, and he was
Oh yeah, I think I
Israeli.
saw that. Yeah. Oh,
That
yes, I did
was
see that. Yeah, that was good.
hilarious. Well,
Yeah.
awful. It was really awful. But afterwards, a whole bunch of things afterwards where um whenever there was some tagline he used that was like, "Don't you trust me?" or whatever it was.
Yeah, don't you
Right.
trust me?
Or don't
Yeah.
you trust me? But I get on with the tagline what it was, but then it became a very funny thing for happily married women to say to their husbands, like or wife would be, I'd be going shopping or something like, do I have to hit the bank or do you have any cash? And she was like, I've seen that movie. I don't want
Right.
fantastic.
Exactly. Oh yeah, I remember, but as you, I can't remember exactly, but I do
So
remember
good.
watching that show. That's true. Um,
That's
but
madness. So this
yeah,
still goes on. So
so I
they prey
broke
on
that
lonely
business,
hearts.
but the funny thing that I discovered what was really depressing was like I thought, well, I've done some good. I saved these women, but in actual fact, they went through a moment of being saved, and then both of these women went back
Of
to the
course,
men.
they
And
did.
even when I played them the threatening messages, and they were horrible messages, like we're going to get you if you ever come back here, or we hate Americans, we hate you. Oh, it's things like, Karen, just say you're a bitch. Say you're a bitch to me. Say you're a bitch, and you can come back here. Like stupid. Like, well, okay, what? But then also, if you ever do come back here, you're not going to get out again, basically. So the thing is that I actually did go back. So,
Why? Why do you
so
want me
I,
to ask? Why?
because I got like really, because I actually liked Luxor, and I got really angry thinking, why would they be able to do this? Number one. And number two, I had all the messages from this guy. All right. I had messages of threats. Number three, I had this program that I was doing, which I had planned on doing, this, My World project. So I had a high school in Los Angeles that was going to do an exchange program and I contacted a nonprofit. I had a nonprofit set up in Luxor, so we were going to do this exchange. We were going to do this thing, and it was all going to happen. And so what I did was
To
I
sell
called.
Los Angeles schoolgirls into slavery? Like, what was the point of
No, no,
this?
no, no, no. The point was the point was to open up a dialogue and to get them talking back and forth. I mean, I still wanted to do something to help like these young, this is a program that I'd done in other countries and had been successful. Um, and so I called Mohammadine and I said, I have these messages from Banjo, and not only is he threatening my life, but these are terrorist attacks. These are could be construed as terrorist threats against America. And I said, you know me, I have a letter ready to go to the Los Angeles Times. I'd already been published in Egyptian Streets, which is a big international Egyptian paper. I'd already had something published there. I said, so I have lawyers, and I have the United States Embassy. Trump was president at this time, mind you. People, a serious, like it was different days between Trump and when Biden became president. And I said, if anything happens to me, I said, I'm coming back. And if anything happens to me, the entire world is going to know you did it. Okay? I never got another threatening message. Nobody ever bothered me again. And that's how you do. I mean, that's like, I mean, it's like, so I went back, and that's when I started the boxing club for girls. And I actually, in a weird, like, this is the thing, it's like I gained a level of respect there. So nobody bothered me anymore. Nobody bothered me. And I was able to actually, but the sad thing about the boxing club for girls, and the other program that I wanted to do, there's so much corruption there. It's so hard to get anything done. So I wanted to do this thing with the girls, but a guy, this guy Ahmed, had to negotiate for me with the fathers. And this gets me back to what you were talking about when they wanted to basically sell their, Morocco, with the daughters, to get you married, to marry them.
Fair, I think that was true love. They were smitten. I mean, they didn't say no.
Exactly.
I'm sure of it.
As I'm sure Mohammadine was truly in love with me.
I'm sure of it.
Which I was never, that like I was always skeptical about that. So, yeah, I had to actually literally pay the fathers. That was how they allowed their daughters to do the boxing.
That sounds about right.
They could never see any value for anything beyond
fight back is horrible. Why would they want to do that?
And I'm actually incredibly, it's like kind of a miracle that they even would let me do that, right? The girls had to be below the age of female genital mutilation. I realized that too. And at a certain point, it became so depressing for me because I realized these girls are only going to be able to do this up to a certain age, because then they can't do anything like this anymore. But on the other hand, like this one woman in the villages, Marwa, she's like a really famous woman. President Sisi even met with her. She's actually wears a man's jalabia. She drives a truck. She's very famous there for going against the grain. And she's just, I don't know, she's somebody that's allowed to do that in the villages, Marwa. So we were friends. She picked up the girls in her truck and would bring them, or she had a van by that point, and she would bring them, and they would have, and we do these classes. And that was like, I don't know, like that was just an incredible experience, because these girls, like to see them kick and punch and do sit-up, and they had so much spirit and so much vitality and so much life. And we would do like these competitions where, you have to sit like against a wall and stay there and see who can stay the longest. Nobody ever wanted to be the first to stop, and I did like a bunch of sessions with them. And then I did like a graduation for them where I made like these certificates for them. Oh, and I made t-shirts for them that said Luxor Boxing Girls and had their names on the back. So we were like this team, something that no other girl there will ever experience, and that they could never have experienced in their life other than then, Sure. And then I had this ceremony where I presented them with their certificates, and they bowed and they came up, like you would do in a dojo, and and not a single father came to that ceremony. Of course, the mothers didn't come; they wouldn't be allowed. But not a single father came, and that was just, it's kind of discouraging. And then COVID happened, and then this other program that I was going to do, everything sort of stopped. Although I have to say, living there, all the tourists left, and it was just these and Luxor became a very dangerous place at that point. Not for me. It never became dangerous although I would never be foolish enough to walk along the Nile or the canals at night by myself, but I was okay. But I ended up having to help, this story gets too long, but another woman basically escaped a mob of violent men, and we basically hardly made it. We were literally escaped out of the country basically because I was helping her and nobody else would help this woman. She was trying to sell her villa, and she was getting attacked. And actually one night I was staying with her, and the neighbor was going to attack the villa in the night and take it over by force because he thought, well, this villa is mine, And so I had a reputation by that point. And so instead of waiting there in the night for that to happen, I went down to the gate and I confronted, he had like 20 men out there roaming around. And my friend Gita, and I've written this story. This was also published in Egyptian Streets, this story. But she had called one friend that she had. None of the women that lived there would help. They all disappeared into their whatever caves. But one man came to try and help her, and he was beaten away with sticks,
Sure.
And so I went down to the gate because I'm not going to wait here. And I said, I'm an American. And again, and this was a thing where what people don't realize, Trump was president. If I had done this when Biden was president, they might have just laughed at me. But, at that time, I said, I'm an American citizen. I'm feeling, in my Mudera voice, I'm feeling threatened by this. I'm not involved in this problem. I am going to be contacting my embassy, and I have, connections, and you are not going to be happy about this because I've heard you're going to attack this villa in the night, and I'm living here, And so the guy, he goes like, oh, no, we love Americans. And he says, oh, never do anything like that. We just have a problem because, we made this deal, and it's all their deals and blah, blah, blah. So I was actually able to invite him in, have him sit down with Gita, and they negotiated a contract, and she sold her villa to him. Now, the thing was, it was all very nice. At least she didn't get attacked, and, whatever would happen to her.
Nickel for it, or then she just left. That was it.
You know what? And I have to say, she told me, she says, Karen, it's thanks to you. She goes, I don't know what would have happened to me there. I said, but I said, I am a witness to this. You made this contract with her, I'm going back, it's so he did, it was probably half, maybe even a third of what it was worth, but she did get her money in the end. Yep. But that wasn't the end of it. Even after they signed that contract, they started dragging her to the police station in the middle of the night, trying to get her to say that the contract wasn't valid and all this kind of stuff. And I just kept saying, just stick with it. Just stick with it. There's really, just, and that was where, we were waiting. We couldn't get out. We used to sit by the Nile with bad red wine and say, we're never getting out of here alive, because there were no flights. It was COVID. We couldn't get out of the country. When there finally was a flight, we happened to get a flight on the same day. She had the men attacked the taxi that was trying to take her to the airport, and she was calling me because it was my friend who was driving the taxi that I trusted, and I was like, I'm coming there, and thank God he didn't just abandon her, this taxi driver. But I came there, and it's there was the police officer. Even the minute he saw me, he was like, oh, there was men on both sides of the car trying to pull her out to say, because you owe us still money, you didn't pay the lawyer enough money, we're taking you to the police station, all this kind of stuff. And so they stopped. I said, get away from the car. We're going to the airport. I got in the car, and then they were just like banging on and calling out prostitutes, prostitutes. And we made it to the
That
airport.
is their
Got out.
favorite epithet, isn't it?
Yeah. And I asked the taxi driver, I said, why do they always call us prostitutes? And he goes, because you are prostitutes. You come here. What he said? He said, you're porn stars on holiday. Porn star. That's a great title, isn't it? Porn stars on holiday. Yeah.
Right.
And I said,
That's
and that was like, and we just had
fantastic.
we had to laugh, and I said, so, but wouldn't porn stars on holiday rather take a rest from have a holiday than, and he says, no, no, always, it was just like, it was so,
Porn
after
stars
all
on
those
holiday.
experiences, it was so
Thank you.
ludicrous and
What
so
I love
like,
about
it was
that
so crazy.
is having spent time in lots of different countries around the world. I'm delighted that my undergraduate degree was in anthropology because it's the only way I can understand any of these people. And the stories people tell themselves about the other, about foreigners, it's always true in every culture, right? But when you get to an insular culture like
Yeah.
that, where they get blips of signal from the outside world, it might as well be us getting random bleeps from SETI satellites, right? And what they construct in their heads out of the few pieces of data they get, combined with what their idiot friends tell each other about the truth about America, is magic.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just magic. What will come out of people's heads, and they'll say it to you like, "Well, that's obvious." Like, what? Well, it's
So this
true.
is, I said,
Don't you
don't
all
you
mate with
understand? And
cows? I assume you did.
I even said like, but aren't you the prostitutes? Because you're the ones taking the money. So,
No, no, no. You have it
no, no,
all
no, no,
wrong.
no, no.
That's not
Yeah,
how that works.
absolutely
No, no,
not.
no.
But I have to say, like, I really felt like these women, I always wanted, I get frustrated because I always think things are obvious to me, but they obviously aren't to other people. Like, if all those foreign women had gotten together and come to Gita's villa and said, we're not standing for this, it would make a difference. If they all said, like, I even thought, maybe they should have they should all, look, this contract, all the women could start demanding this contract that my daughter, but then you know what? That would be the end of Luxor, right? Because there would be
That's
no more
so absolutely
business,
bizarre. And look,
so
thank you for this view into Luxor because I wasn't particularly aware of this at all. I mean, it's not surprising. Um, but what would be the final takeaway? Because I'm going to let you go shortly. What would be the sort of biggest thing aside from don't go to Luxor and like crazy Arab and steal all your shit? Like what would be your thoughts for
no,
let's
I mean,
choose the Western woke idiots who are marching in support of Hamas, who would throw them off roofs for their activities? Like how do you or can we get through to the woke pink-haired idiot in Harvard Yard is as impervious to logic and reality as your taxi driver in Luxor is telling you that he knows you're a prostitute. There's no
mhm,
difference
exactly.
qualitatively between those two pieces of idiocy. And is there any hope, or this is just the human condition, and we're going to stumble through the rest of humanity being really dumb and knowing nothing?
Well,
A
first of
loaded
all,
question.
yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say, yeah, do go to Luxor. I mean, Luxor,
No
like,
thanks.
I mean, as a tourist, no, they will, because I should have also said, I had those messages because I could have gone to the East Bank and they would have been put in prison. All right, it's just you have to know because as a tourist you're going to be fine. They're going to try and cheat you with little things, but they depend on tourist business, so they're not so stupid as to. And it's an amazing place like no place else. It's the Valley of the Kings, all these incredible temples, and I mean it is an amazing place. So yeah, just you can go there, but just don't listen to the guy that comes up to you in his jalebi and starts talking to you. That's a mistake.
My friend,
But
my friend.
exactly. I
I'm
never
more of my
seen
friends to last
anyone
a
like you
lifetime.
your eyes, they are so beautiful, blah blah blah. But somehow it sounds, there's like a spell there. Somehow it sounds silly here, but somehow when you're sitting by the Nile, it doesn't sound so silly.
They've proven
but
this all this
but
time.
but the other thing is that I think I don't know what we can do because it is like I try so hard, and I guess an eternal optimist. Obviously, I went back to Luxor. Okay, so I mean, I think that like I'm a fighter, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to speak out, and but these people, I don't know what it's like some kind of a it is like a spell that has fallen on them, or they can't see, or that it's just, a lot of times I think it's just they just hate Jews. They just hate Jews so much that they and that has come out like of the woodwork, like in such an astonishing way, this hatred of, and I don't even like to call it anti-Semitism anymore, because
Not
that use has been overused and it's been hijacked like all these other words. So
beyond that, it's not because Arabs are Semites too. So
exactly. So
it's
they can
Jew
say
hatred.
it is plain basic hatred of Jews to such an extent that they would rather support the terrorists that would come and massacre them and rape their child than support the Jews. That's the horrific thing. That is the bottom line, I think, of what it comes down to, because there's no other explanation. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Not only, and I talked with this about Yasmin, who's Egyptian, not only, I'm thinking, well, maybe they'll listen to me because I'm a Western woman who is in this situation, but they completely ignore, they will not accept it. They will not believe it. So yeah, I don't,
Facts. Always
unless it
wrong,
takes,
never in
and you
doubt.
can see what's happening in England, what's happening in Europe.
Yeah.
They don't take it as, I mean, none of these people would really want to live under Sharia law. They wouldn't want to. So yeah, it makes no sense. So I don't even know what to say anymore. I mean, I'll continue telling my story, and maybe there's some people that will listen on, but I don't really know. I don't really
Well,
know,
I
honestly.
appreciate that because I mean there is no answer except for brute force to beat these assholes back into the
Exactly.
ground. I really, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't. After the funny thing I find is that Jews are predisposed to believe in not only the inherent goodness and beneficiality of study and education, but also some of that education will lead to a solution. It's the biggest mistake my people make because it's not.
Yeah.
There's like the plenty of prominent. What was so beautiful about that Tarantino film, Inglorious Bastards, which he portrayed better than many other people have, oddly, in different types of movies. You would have Nazi general officers who spoke four languages fluently, had PhDs. These were
Mm,
highly educated people. They weren't ignorant. It's very comfortable to say, well, only the ignorant. It's not
mm-mm.
an educational issue, although many incredibly stupid people hate Jews, but many bright people do too. And it's a moral failing. There's a lot to it, but it's not education. Now, it doesn't mean
No,
I
we've seen
stop
that.
writing, doesn't mean I don't stop talking about it. Doesn't, but when I get argued with by people, I'm like, I'm not here to argue with you. I don't care. You come from a long line of failures in life. Your father hated Jews, your grandfather hated Jews. I don't care. I'm not here to hear what you have to say. I don't care. Let me tell you, if you lift a hand against my people, we now have a country and an army and will come get you. Like
Yeah,
that's the
how
only
dare
answer.
you? You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to, Oh, and the whole thing between Jews and Zionists, it was very clever. You were going to distinguish between Jews and Zionists. Okay, so if you're a Jew and you're willing to, be passive, you're fine. We love you. But if you're a Zionist and you're going to, object, then, you're evil, and you need to be
Nonsense.
done away
None
with.
of these people
Yeah.
gave a shit. I mean, when Assad killed 400,000 Pakistanians in a suburb of Damascus, was there one pink-haired fruitcake
No,
marching on Harvard
exactly.
Yard?
No,
They don't
no.
give a shit about the Pakistanians. They don't care in the slightest at all. None of them. And it's been both horrifying and insane to watch. Um, but
And the
we're
irony,
World War
and the
III.
irony of, yeah, if you're talking about education, all the top universities, that's where they're having all of the, these stupid protests, and the professors, the communists that are indoctrinating the kids. And the irony of, I wrote a piece about that. Let's talk about stolen land. The hypocrisy that every single one of those universities is built on stolen land. And they're protesting the stolen land in
It's it's
Israel.
it's
It's
it's so
so.
stupid. All of human history is a push and pull. In the West, we used to raise people to be winners, and then we let the Marxist left. The first time I heard toxic masculinity, I just roared with laughter. So what the fuck is that supposed to mean? You mean the people that keep you safe from evil people? That toxic masculinity? It is the big reversal we're having now. November 4th, 2023 will go down in history as peak woke. It ended there. It ended there with the voters speaking and
Yeah.
saying, this is insanity. And I'm convinced if Vance had been the top of the ticket or DeSantis had been top of the ticket, it would have been 90-10. It would have been Reagan Mondale all over again. The fact that it was only 52% is because so many people hate Trump. I'm
Yeah.
convinced of it. But this crap that normal Americans are waking up like, wait, hold on. Bobby kept coming in 14th in his swim meets, and suddenly in his senior year he's Jane and he gets to take away gold medals. Like this was the first thing Biden signed into executive order day one of his
Yeah.
presidency. Bobby
Madness.
can find out and swim against and beat girls in sports, and we're going to cancel a pipeline. Those are the two priorities of the Biden maladministration. And the great part is all of that bullshit, the 4 years of this nonsense was just washed away. Washed away. In Europe, I was just over there. They are crying in their socialist tea about this horrible event. And it was great to talk to people. I'm like, if I could bottle leftist tears, I could sell like Angostura bitters for martinis. It was awesome
Where were
how
you?
upset they were. Portugal and then the
Oh,
UK.
okay. Interesting
But
in the UK. Wow.
madness. But I'll let you go. This is
Yeah,
fantastic. I
thank
love
you.
you. Thank you so much.